Okay, everyone, welcome to the first public safety drone review, sponsored by Drone Responders and DRONELIFE. And we'll give everybody a couple minutes to get in. So if you will, sit back and we'll get ready to go in just a minute. For those of you coming in, we'll give it just a couple more minutes to let everybody get in, and then we'll get started. So thanks for your patience. Okay, we are 2 minutes after the hour, so I want to welcome everyone. My name is Charles Werner. I'm the Director of Drone Responders, and I'm pleased to come on today to announce our new Public Safety Drone Review, a monthly webinar series that will be hosted by Miriam McNabb and Tim Martin, and they'll tell a little bit about themselves each time. We're excited. I think we've been talking about this for about a year now, and we finally have connected all the dots and making it a reality. I'll turn this over to Miriam and let her tell a little bit about what the program's going to be about, and we'll get moving. Miriam.
Thanks so much, Charles and Chris. We are so excited to be part of this collaboration here at DRONELIFE. So we've been talking with Tim Martin, who will be my co-host. He is, of course, a veteran police officer and an expert in public safety drone use. We're really excited to be able to kind of bring you the current issues, the newest technology, the regulations, and the points that are sort of relevant to the public safety drone community each month. And we will be having guests that we think are interesting for our audience when they're available. We have some lined up for next month. But I am Miriam McNabb. I'm editor of DRONELIFE. We've been in business since 2013, publishing commercial drone news on the internet. So at this point, we have more than 20,000 subscribers to our daily newsletter. Hope that you will join us. Tim, how about you introducing yourself?
Thank you, Miriam. Chris and Charles, thanks for hosting this webinar. We have been talking about this for probably as COVID began. It was an idea, a concept that came up. So I'm excited that we're finally getting it off the ground. And Miriam and I have a lot of things planned for the future as far as guests and what topics we're going to talk about. So I'm excited there. I am recently retired, July of last year, police captain with Huntington Beach Police Department. I worked there for 28 years, had an incredible career. Probably the last 5 years of my career is what got me into drones. Started our drone program there along with a partner at the time. We started it from the ground up. There wasn't really a lot out there in 2015 to go off of, so it was quite a journey. That journey led to eventually teaching at the Regional Training Center, which is California-based public safety drone training center where we cover a multitude of topics from beginner to advanced skills. Since retiring, I currently work there as the director of training, still heavily involved in the drone industry and doing some side work as well that kind of exposes me to a lot of different aspects, including federal, military, and the infamous blue UAS process, which has been an interesting adventure for me to get involved in that process. But I'm excited to be here, and that's it for me.
Great. So today, to start off our podcast, we have our illustrious guests, our partners, Chris Todd from AIRT and Charles Werner from Drone Responders, who you all know. So thank you so much for agreeing to participate with us as our guests. Let's dive into our first topic, just to kind of get things rolling. Charles, we spoke earlier about a new law being proposed in Mississippi. This is not the same as the law that was passed or the ordinance or whatever you want to call it in Florida, limiting the purchase of public drones to the blue SUAS list. However, it does give some favoritism to US made products. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, there's a couple bills I think now that are going through legislation, some funding. Some of the things that are in there is it doesn't impact, I think, the training, the technical, the education side of things. So it's not as far reaching. I'm still waiting to see what the finality of what that Mississippi law is, but it does look like it's turning toward American drone companies, similar to what happened in Florida. But in Florida, as you know, they basically said it has to be blue UAS. And the problem with that is that the blue UAS is designed for DoD only, and it can't expand the number of companies on that list. And I think that leads into the next conversation of what's happening at AUVSI. So as we know, AUVSI partnered with DIU to take kind of the blue UAS and bring it into the commercial world so that it could actually be a more robust list. So it means that companies will be able to pay for testing, and hopefully there will be a lot. This is one of the things that I've requested, is that they have a lot of third-party testers so that that list can grow very quickly, so that public safety and anybody else who has to be in that situation of a UAS approved drone can have many more choices. So I don't want to get into the Mississippi law too much because there's still some things that are happening, evolving in that, but it does look like it's leaning towards that. And I think we're starting to hear similar things from other states.
Yeah. And, Chris, I know AIRT did a very comprehensive survey last year, right, in 2022, that kind of found still we do have heavy representation in the public safety community with DJI, right? Heavily represented throughout the commercial drone industry. So talk a little bit about how this can affect the public safety community.
Yeah, absolutely. First of all, congrats on the podcast. Thanks for having me. We're excited about this. Yeah, I mean, there's no doubt that we're continuing to see a lot of pressure on DJI, you mentioned, but technology coming from foreign countries of concern. And I think that's just been exacerbated this week by the whole Chinese spy balloon incident, and where that's going to take us and where that's going to carry the conversation within the halls of government over what technology is being used. But yeah, at AIRT, we've done some research with drone responders. Our last survey saw about 96% of US public safety agencies were using DJI as at least a part of their fleet. We saw in Florida what happens when the legislative landscape changes and technology from a country of foreign concern becomes banned, for lack of a better word. And it's been a struggle in Florida to really figure out and decipher the intention of the legislation versus the actual written law and what it means for public safety agencies. And it's a continuing battle. And we're obviously seeing this now proliferate. Mississippi, there's talks about Virginia. We saw an attempt in Wisconsin. I think it's going to continue to be something that we see exacerbated just over the next couple of months based on what the geopolitical climate is right now.
And Tim, with your experience in the training center out in California, what are you seeing? How are people in the public safety community sourcing drones, and what kind of hardware are they looking at? Are they aware of these concerns? What's your experience there talking to departments trying to get started?
It's obviously a complicated issue. It's when you look at law enforcement as a whole, that bell has been rung. We can't go back in time. Drones have fundamentally changed how we operate in public safety. We've changed our tactics. We've saved lives because we're not rushing into dangerous scenes. And still to this day, we're still having officers that are killed in the line of duty in situations where drones could have benefited from them. And what we're doing is kind of going backwards. In California, we're not seeing it. There are some agencies, one-offs here and there, that are kind of jumping on the bandwagon. If it's good enough for for the military, it's good enough for Florida. Federal government is good enough for us. We're doing it. There's a very large utility company that grounded hundreds of drones in their fleet, and they had to go and purchase off the blue list. And I think what has to change is there. You look at Florida specifically. Florida came out with this law, and then they suffered a major disaster. And the same people who were up there saying no more drones from this country are praising the work that the drones are doing in that disaster, and the real-time situational awareness that was provided. But it didn't change the outtake of Florida. So a big disaster like that is I think they're writing on the wall is that we're getting Mississippi. At least Mississippi is a little bit different. Like you said, Charles, it's proposed. We don't have a final view on it, but what Mississippi says is that they're not as specific as Florida was with you can only use a manufacturer on the blue list. They said you can use a platform that's not from that country and no components from that country. So they're changing how they're doing it. So yeah, the struggle in trying to find platforms. I'll just say this last piece. The fundamental change in law enforcement, we can't go back. It's up to law enforcement leaders to say, okay, we're not going backwards. We're not going to give up what we already have in this technology. The funding has got to increase. We've got to make the people in charge realize that if you're going to force agencies to give up these life-saving tools, you have got to increase their funding by 10 times in order to replace the fleets that are currently in operation.
Yeah. And I think it's also really important. I mean, I think the four of us are probably aware, when you talk about the DIU's blue SUAS list, it's important to note that list is really of platforms. It's not a list of manufacturers. So when you use it as a list of manufacturers, that's not actually the way the program was designed to function. So where I think there was some confusion in the way that the policy was written in Florida. So the blue SUAS list was designed to be a list of very specific drones, of very specific platforms that met the needs of the Department of Defense, not every drone from a specific manufacturer. So we should clarify that. And there are also other ways of sort of measuring, right? We also had the Drone Act. What do you call that when it's compliant with all of those? I'm blanking on the word here.
National Defense Authorization Act?
The National Defense
NDA?
Authorization.
Yeah,
NDA compliant. That's what I was looking for. So there are other ways of sort of demonstrating compliance with secure platforms, but the blue SUAS list specifically is designed to be a list of drones, not of manufacturers.
Yeah, and Miriam, that's a great point, because if you look at what the intention of all this is, I mean, we can sit here and you can talk about security. Is that relevant issue? Is it geopolitical? Is it protectionism to a certain degree? Perhaps, who knows? But when you look at what happened with Huawei, right? It wasn't like they started, okay, let's look at telecommunications equipment and components and models and manufacturers. They just said, hey, we want to ban Huawei. I mean, that was the intention. So let's just simplify this somehow. I mean, all this blue UAS, go get your drone analyzed. It's like somebody just figure out what it is that you want and make it simple, because it's getting a little crazy. It's getting a little nuts. It's way too confusing, and it's just a bunch of hurdles, and it's messing up the industry as much as anything right now, especially I think from the public safety side.
And I think to your point, what's interesting is that the new partnership between AUVSI and DIU is going to be opening up for more testing, but it's still bound by the NDAA requirements, which means, again, as you mentioned, Chris, it's going to ban DJI essentially from being on any of that approved list.
Yep. So we'll see where this leads. It's a story, certainly at Drone Life we've been following for a couple of years now, and we'll see how this evolves.
Hey, Miriam, I've got one last comment on that, if I could.
Of course.
And that, in aviation, we talk so much about risk management, and we talk about it predominantly from an operational perspective as managing risk when you're operating the aircraft. As a UAS program manager, especially in critical infrastructure or public safety, right now, I think there's a different type of risk management that these program managers need to be looking at. And that is, if you've built your entire fleet around one type of manufacturer, one type of aircraft, there is some risk there. There's risk, as we saw in Florida, based on the legislative landscape changing. There is risk on something happening at the federal government. There's just risk. It's not like the manned aviation, like where we've got Boeing and Airbus and they're proven and the technology is mature. This is a very immature industry that is still evolving. It's still expanding. And I would just say, use caution if you are building a public safety fleet all around one type of product or one type of manufacturer. Something bad could happen if that landscape changes. So just be aware of that.
That's a good point, Chris, because that's one of the things we, in all of our classes that we pitch to agencies that are putting programs together is you have to diversify your fleet and have different options, especially when it comes to secured areas, geofencing. We don't always operate in perfect open conditions. A lot of times you have to have different fleets for different purposes. And I think that is also one of the issues that we're coming across is just what is out there and what's the price point, what draws, I think half the programs in law enforcement that are out there right now wouldn't even be operating at this point if they weren't buying drones at the price point they're buying them at.
Very good point. And specifically when you said, we need different fleets for different purposes, different environments, depends on where you are, what kind of, terrain you're dealing with. Are you in an urban area or a rural area, and so forth. So let's move on to our next sort of big current event story, which is the tragic earthquakes that occurred in Turkey and Syria. We're seeing lots and lots of building collapses there. So, Chris, I wanted to touch base with you specifically on this question first, based on your work with kind of AIRT. How do you think that these search and rescue teams will be utilizing drones, as they are still actually to the minute pulling people out of the rubble right now, pulling out survivors?
Yeah, it's so sad to see what's going on over there. AIRT does not have a lot of, we're not operating in Turkey or Syria right now, so we don't have any assets over there. But I can tell you, based on what we saw in Surfside when that building collapsed, there's somewhat limited use for drones in search and rescue when you've got collapsed buildings. I mean, I think ground robotics and other types of robotic systems, depending on cracks and crevices, might be useful. I mean, drones are great for mapping the scene, mapping changes in the scene, assessing the condition of any remaining structures. And I think we're going to see a lot of that going on. The same types of commercial operations we're seeing right now in the US, everything from incident management, real-time live streaming of the incident, checking bridges, checking buildings, checking railways, power delivery, trying to get the power system back on, port management, water infrastructure, telecommunications. I mean, these are all the types of things where I think drones are going to be really useful to trying to assess the situation, mapping staging sites. The search and rescue, I'm sure it's being used to a certain degree, but it's there's so much devastation. It sounds to me like it's a lot of neighbors pulling neighbors out of the pile, and I'm not sure how much information you're going to get from a drone in the immediate aftermath of the incident. But I think we'll see just some incredible use cases emerging as the response and recovery process unfolds.
Yeah. And if I can add to that, I did an article on the Surfside collapse. And what was interesting is I was doing an article about the collapse, but it turned out to be an article about drones, because drones were the story. The drones were there used first to put lighting on the debris pile to be able to start doing some of the surface searching. It was used to go under the parking garage where they couldn't get access, and they were concerned more collapse might fall on the rescuers looking. It was used in other sections of the building to do engineering to determine did it need to come down, which it did. So there are these different angles. And then as in the searching situation, if you have buildings that have void spaces, the drones will be valuable to be able to fly up and into those spaces that you might not be able to get to otherwise. So drones are going to play an important role in all this as we go forward. It just depends on what the opportunities avail at those situations.
And I will say too, oh, sorry, Tim, did you want to
No, go
break
ahead.
in
Go
there?
ahead.
Okay. I will say too that most of the information that we do have around the world about what this disaster looks like is coming from drone footage. So that is the way that the message is being spread globally to kind of gather help and let everybody know what's going on. During the Surfside condo collapse, I know that Brink drones brought a team in to do sort of search and rescue kind of inside of buildings, right? If you're not sure about a building, maybe that's a time to send a drone in to see who they can find. But Tim, what were you gonna
Yeah, as an end user, I've been kind of keeping up on the disaster over there, and it's an interesting perspective. When I look at an incident like that, I think of as a end user and a team manager, how would we deploy out there, and what are the challenges we're going to have? And one of the things that struck me the most about that region is right now they're having below freezing temperatures. It's raining, which takes out 90% of the fleet of what is being used in the world right now, because water does not. You need to have a drone that's rated to fly in rain, and if you want to use it for that, that's a big concern. Is what equipment are you going to use in those regions that have weather concerns, battery issues? How do you keep your batteries charged in an area that has no electricity? The speaker element, which a lot of drones don't have, but when you have a speaker ability to make announcements and tell people where to go to get help is a big thing. But I think you nailed one of my biggest points, Miriam, is in a region like that, the devastation and the aid that follows is a lot of that depends on visual imaging, and the devastation was clearly displayed with drone footage. You Google that disaster and you just type in Turkey earthquake drones, and you get nothing but news reports from CNN and all the major outlets where they're showing drone video, and those dramatic videos is what gets the aid to them quicker. Also, it's not drone related, but I think they're going to try to integrate it eventually. But NASA has a device that's a heartbeat sensor, and they're deploying it over there right now. It may even be the first time they're using it, but it could penetrate 30 feet into debris and rubble and the ground to pick up heartbeats. So
that's amazing.
And there are different sensors. There are different sensors that are made for that. I'll tell you one that we worked with and had at one of our presentations was Macarena Varela, who's in Germany, who's doing some research where they've created an audio array that they can widen it out and listen to a wide area, and they have artificial intelligence with a library of all the different sounds that you might hear: banging pipes, somebody crying, somebody yelling, all those kind of sounds, that picks it up so that it indicates to the pilot you've got an anomaly, and then it can actually narrow the focus of the audio display and pick it up and define it more narrowly. So I think we're going to see a lot more things that are going to come out of this that are going to give us opportunities. But one thing that Tim said it's important to hit on: drones give us the ability to understand how bad is bad really quick. So that changes the dynamics. And then on the other side of it, it helps us to understand our recovery. So we can determine the size of debris piles, do we need to remove them. We're also able to use it to see when water has receded, when roads are reopened, and those kind of things. So they're going to play a tremendous role continuously.
Yeah, and a couple of the other things we're watching is, obviously you've heard, probably if you're following the Ukrainian-Russian conflict, they've been talking about Turkish drones, and Turkish drones doing some pretty amazing things. I think we're going to see some new technology emerge in this that maybe here in the US we haven't been exposed to. We focus a lot in the industry on small UAS, but you're going to see large military drones, because Turkey is a NATO ally, all coming into play here. And I think it's kind of as horrible as any kind of disaster is, and this is a big one. There might be some silver lining in actually looking at some of the good things these larger systems can do, rather than drop bombs and all the horrible things, we've heard it from a wartime perspective over the last decade or so. So, we're also looking at things like airspace management, right? There's going to be helicopter traffic with small drones, with large drones, robotic systems coming in. So there's going to be a lot of information to dissect when this incident gets somewhat under control. And it's going to be very interesting to weed through that information and see what we can glean to bring back here to the U.S.
And I think that air boss topic stuff is something we ought to be looking at for one of the next issues of upcoming webinars.
One of the things that
Really
Miriam
good.
and one of the things that Miriam and I didn't discuss in the beginning of this webcast is we absolutely welcome questions or comments or knowledge. If you have a question or you have input on the topics we're talking about, feel free to throw it in the chat, and we'll get those addressed. We're going to have the ability at the end for any questions, but I think it's important that this isn't just the four of us or eventually, whoever it may be, just up here talking. We really want to get participation involved with the attendees because there are a lot of experts and a lot of people with good knowledge that can add to the conversation.
And Miriam, at the end, you
Absolutely.
can give your email address to, if they have topics that they'd like to see covered in here, we can take.
Absolutely. Please. I'll give it right now. I'm Miriam at DroneLife. I'm very easy to find, but please do send us an email. Let us know what you think, and also let us know what you'd like to see on a future episode. So moving from the sort of larger disaster to a much smaller event closer to home, but we're still talking about search and rescue. There was a piece of news that came out this week about police using a drone in a search and rescue situation to find a runaway child. And I thought this was interesting because I thought, Tim, when you and I were sort of discussing in pre-show, you mentioned that there's a lot more that goes into a search and rescue operation than just kind of flying a drone around looking for somebody, especially with the use of thermal. So do you want to talk about kind of some situations where that works and situations where it does not work?
Well, as I mentioned before, I think when you talk about search and rescue situations, especially at night, weather is a factor. So you have to contend with, is it foggy? Is it rainy, snowy, snowing, that kind of thing. But the operation end of it is, if you've got a large area to search, the first thing has to be done is you got to determine what's going to be searched and with what device. There's some great stories out there where these agencies are putting drones up after search teams have been walking around for hours, and within a few minutes, they're finding their target on the ridge of a mountain or huddled in some bushes, and it's pretty impressive to see. And the only way that's possible at those great distances is the technology of a minimal 640 thermal, which is otherwise you're kind of spinning your wheels with anything less than that. The thermal camera is vital to any search and rescue operation, even during the day, day or night. We're using thermal cameras more during the day on long-term searches than we would the visible camera, just because it sees in shadows and under cars and bushes and behind sheds and trash cans and all that stuff. It's easy to lose contrast with the lighting. So how do you set up grids? Where do you start your search? How many teams do you have? How far can you go? If you're working off of 107 rules and you got to keep visual line of sight of that aircraft and the airspace around it, your search area is going to have to be somewhat small. So there's all kinds of factors: battery maintenance, personnel, and one thing I'm seeing a lot more of, and we're talking about it in training a lot more, is there's a lot of agencies out there that are banding together to create drone programs that are not just Huntington Beach Police Department. It's multiple agencies are coming together to create these programs that have, they're tripling, quadrupling their resources with personnel and aircraft, and maybe one agency has a waiver that allows them to fly maybe one agency has a fixed wing or a VTOL that has a beyond visual line of sight waiver, that type of thing. So bringing in other agencies and cooperation in those searches is something that is key. But a lot of times it's just the first on scene gets the first drone up there with a good thermal camera. And I think in this case that you're talking about, it was pretty quick that they found this kid huddling in some bushes and trying to stay warm. And it's pretty incredible to see that footage. And all I can say is for agencies that have that footage, that have those wins where we're getting up there, put it out to the media, put it out for the world to see, because that's what's going to help programs struggling to get off the ground. That may be the one video that they show to their city council or board of supervisors that says, okay, that's it. We're going together with the program.
Yeah.
I
And
want to add something
definitely,
to that. I'm sorry, I want to add something to that. I just wanted to say that they learned early on the efficacy of using drones for search, that if you don't have a model of how you're going to do that, you spend more time trying to figure out how to use the drone. And one of the things we got to make sure of is we don't stop the normal search process. In other words, the search process by the ground pounders, the people that are out on the boots, boots on the ground to do the searching, that needs to continue as usual. Then you figure out how does a drone enhance what you're doing. And what they learned was the drone helps probably some of the most is being able to see the terrain that people are actually going to be traversing. They can help to see and search large fields more quickly. And the other thing that they do is they just give you the ability to look very quickly. So they found if you look at the lost people in a lost people study, 80% of the people are found within 2 miles of where they got lost. So the drone can really take a quick look of everything around very quickly, and you might be able to see even a child if they happen to have a bright orange coat on very quickly that might be on a property that you could find while the searchers are continuing to do what they do. Don't let the drone slow down the search process.
yeah, absolutely. But I also think it's a good opportunity, shameless plug for drone responders here, because if you are in the public safety community and you're looking to collaborate with other public safety communities as sort of a force multiplier for those emergencies, which are thankfully, don't happen every day. So it makes sense to pool resources. Good place to start.
Yeah, and we're working with a couple of people in Texas to take what they've done in their regional teams to give a guidance of how people can do that. If you're looking for resources, the resource center at our DRONERESPONDERS.org website is free, and we have information of different search and rescue missions and just a lot of information. We also have the dashboard. So if you're looking to see who's around you, you can go to dashboard.DRONERESPONDERS.org, and I'll put that in the chat to see which agencies may be around you. If you're not on the dashboard, get on it.
Great. All right.
We have a question. I'll read it. Apparently the chat is disabled, so they went with the Q&A option. So thank you for pointing that out. As an independent 107 operator with limited fleet, is it realistic to lend a hand to public safety arena? How would one go about connecting with local authorities? Yeah, I think there is a lot of collaboration between private entities and public safety agencies, especially in rural areas, smaller departments that don't have drone programs. And there's a lot of reserve search and rescue programs out there where they have specifically members of the community that are on the search and rescue team as drone operators for that purpose. So I have heard a lot of stories of, as you put it, lending a hand in public safety areas. Generally, it's going to be your more rural areas that don't have programs or are very limited in their resources. But you never know until you reach out to your department and offer the services. It's not unheard of, that's for sure.
Yeah, and I would just say, step number one, like anything, you need to build a relationship. You've got to build trust. I mean, if you just show up with a drone, hey, I'm here to help, they're going to look at you like, okay, who are you? It's something like the earthquake in Turkey. Okay, maybe they're more inclined to say, yeah, hey, you got a drone, throw it up. But by and large, you've got to really get to know your local public safety agency if you're looking to work with them. And you do that before there is an emergency need for your services. So go in and make them aware of who you are, offer to train with them, capture video of their exercise. the other part of this question is it really depends on the agency. Larger agencies in metro areas are probably going to be a little more apprehensive about saying, yeah, come work with us. Whereas a small town volunteer fire department that has a very limited budget and limited resources, if you can bring a drone to an incident scene, and that might be just a piece of equipment that, they've been, salivating for to have. So if you're in a small town, I would say the chances are a little bit higher that you can work your way into those types of relationships. So again, you've got to really assess who you're looking to work with. And the third thing I'll just say on that is if you really want to work with incident management, you need to understand FEMA's incident command system, ICS, and there's free courses you can take online through the FEMA Learning Center to get brushed up and certified through the different basic levels like ICS 100, 200, 700, and 800, which are really the prerequisites for anyone that's going to work with public safety or emergency management on incident management or emergency response. So check out FEMA's ICS, the Independent Learning Center. They may have changed the name. I know they keep remodeling that website, but look for the FEMA 100, 200, 700, and 800 courses if you're looking to get started.
And they are free. And once you take them, they'll provide you online certificates that'll come right to you to print. Yeah, I just wanted to give a shout out. So if you look at Manchester, Connecticut, they have used their community emergency response team, the CERT team, as a way of bringing citizens in to serve as drone responders. And the same thing in Campbell, California, I think. So CERTs are another way to do it. But again, like Chris said, go through it in an organized way. Don't self-deploy.
Great question, though. Thank you. All right. Fun news. Super Bowl. We got the Super Bowl coming up. And as always, I get the notice from the FAA, TFR all over the Super Bowl. No drones anywhere, no drone zone over the Super Bowl. So I wanted to kind of talk about that a little bit because anytime there's a large public event like that, you've got security, right? You've got security issues, and drones are great for securing an area. But if you have a TFR going on, you can't fly there. I don't know. It's an indoor stadium. What do we think's going on here? What do you guys feel as sort of law enforcement and public safety professionals about there being kind of blanket TFR over I think that's probably a necessary step just to take care of, people who don't understand it's a bad idea.
Well, all right. So the Super Bowl is obviously an incident of national significance, and you can imagine the headlines that would created by a nefarious act or a terrorist organization that somehow used a small drone to conduct some type of attack at or near the Super Bowl, potentially on live TV, would be covered around the world. So yeah, it's because we've got hobbyist flyers and we've got commercial flyers. We see the FAA annually becoming very increasing the level of communication surrounding, don't fly a drone anywhere near the Super Bowl site. And I think we're starting to see that with all different types of sporting events, from NASCAR to regular NFL games, Major League Baseball. I mean, it's a serious problem, and it's a serious threat, not a problem. But we're seeing what's happening in Mexico with the cartels, in Venezuela with the assassination attempt, with what's happening again in the Ukraine-Russian conflict, that small unmanned aircraft systems, uncrewed aircraft systems are being used to carry different types of weapons and devices that can really cause an incident. And so if one of those black swan incidents would happen here, it's going to be a game changer for how we look at small UAS and how government looks to mitigate those types of threats.
It's definitely a challenging endeavor for local law enforcement. I know that when the Super Bowl was in Inglewood, it was the TFR was enacted and law enforcement couldn't even fly in and around. And both, the State Farm Stadium in Glendale and the stadium in Inglewood are both covered. So the threat is more on the outside, where law enforcement is more than capable of detection and maybe even pilot interdiction through, certain technologies. But it is frustrating for local law enforcement when their operation is really dictated by the Super Bowl property. Glendale, Arizona, if you didn't know, has a incredibly advanced, robust drone program. In a very short amount of time, they've built this program up to be probably the best in Arizona. They do DFR work, true DFR work, and a bunch of other things. And I don't even think that Glendale is able to fly in that. Typically it's a 3-mile radius over sports stadiums. Disneyland has had a TFR in effect since 2001. So it's very challenging for law enforcement. It's not impossible. The local agencies are getting approval to fly, but that's it.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think that I had a chance to talk to some of the people from Glendale, Arizona, and I think they've got things done where their waivers will allow them to fly.
Good.
I think the biggest thing early on was trying to figure out how to manage the potential threat of all the different people. And mostly it was, you have the news media, and then you have people that are curious. That's what most of it is. They want to get the shots. And even if it's not the Super Bowl inside, they want to get the shots of outside, what's happening all around it, because there's lots of activity that's occurring that's interesting. So, but I think they've resolved that some, and we're seeing some new things we'll talk about in one of the future episodes about some new waivers that are coming that are going to help public safety.
And I think we should address kind of one of the obvious points is certainly from a lay perspective, as you think, well, why don't they just use counter drone technology, right? Why can't you just secure the area with counter drone technology? And that's not as easy as it sounds. Am I right? Because of the regulations currently that say you cannot disable, only very specific federal personnel can sort of manage drone threats and disable drone threats and can truly deploy counter drone technology. So it's not as simple as kind of just setting up a counter drone system around the Super Bowl.
Yeah, that's true. But those agencies that have the authority at this point to mitigate and intercept those threats are protecting the Super Bowl. I think it's more of an issue of just not wanting to get to that point. I mean, kind of, again, Chinese spy balloon, right? They didn't want to shoot down the spy balloon over the mainland US because they didn't know where the debris was going to fall. So if you do, in essence, have a small unmanned aircraft system laden with explosives, you don't want that coming down in a residential area. So it's just it's a scenario we don't want to see, and that's why you've got the top law enforcement agencies in the country protecting incidents like the Super Bowl.
Yeah. And usually we find out later. So I'll keep an eye out on my inbox. I'll let you know next month if I find out who was protecting the Super Bowl and exactly how they did that. They like to keep that close to the vest until after the event.
Yeah, usually that's the FBI.
Yeah.
The FBI is the one to take the lead on protecting those facilities, and they have trained people. They have a whole counter UAS team that does that. I will say that we're drone responders are also a member of the counter UAS coalition, which involves all the major sporting events, NASCAR, Walt Disney, as mentioned before, pushing this forward to say we need to move somewhere. And one of the things that we've heard is they need more information. And yet on the other side of it, we have still some really gray areas about what we can do in the area of detection so that we actually know what the airspace looks like. And we asked the legislators, could you at least clear up the area that will allow us to do detection so we can identify what our airspace looks like?
And one other comment I want to make is when you think about counter UAS, you've got to think about two components, right? You have to think about capability and authority. And we've seen a lot of small, mid-sized public safety agencies be kind of duped into acquiring technology or pursuing technology that gives them a certain capability, but doesn't necessarily give them the authority to use it. And so if you are a public safety agency program manager or somebody responsible for securing critical infrastructure or significant events, but before you go out and spend a boatload of money on the capability, make sure you have authority to use it.
That
that's
is an
something we can help you with here at Drone
excellent
Responders.
point. Excellent point. You can buy a flying car, but you cannot take it to the grocery store right now. So that is excellent point. All right, I think we have time for one more story. Bringing this to Charles as our firefighting expert here. Story on CNN this week about a fire starting drone. So they call them Dragon Eggs. It is a long range unmanned vehicle that drops fire starting equipment to initiate controlled burns in a way to manage firefighters. What do you think?
Yeah, so this tactic has been used a lot in the fire service. It's called a backfire. And the idea is that you burn the fuel ahead of the fire and the two fires come together. And they stop at that point. I will just say on the in the wildfire setting, excuse me, what we've seen is there's a lot that's happening. If you look at wildfires individually, drones are being used in 6 different areas. They're doing it for pre-fire analysis. They're doing it for during the fire to locate where it is and determine direction of travel. They're using it for after the fire's been knocked down for using the thermal, looking for hot spots. They're using it after the fire to reevaluate the fire on the floor, the fire loading on the floor of the forest. And so now they're using it for doing the Dragon Eggs to be able to fly out and do these missions for longer distances, which means you don't have to deploy people as much as you did before. And that's the good part. The other thing I'll lead into is a teasing for the next thing we talk about is the FAA has been working very closely with a group we've been involved in to give some new waivers. And I'm not going to get into that yet because it hasn't been released, but it may give us some pre-incident SGIs that give us more flexibility to do some things toward wildfire fighting.
Great.
Yeah, what's really interesting about that subject and that technology is that it kind of gives you a glimpse into the future of where we're going. I've seen detect and avoid technology work in person with the census drone. They've got the nose cone that has the sense and detect and avoid technology. It's incredibly impressive to watch it work. NASA has been partnering with the U.S. Forest Service to work on that technology on quadcopters. The census drone is obviously a fixed wing VTOL, but on quadcopters, there's that delicate mix between manned aviation and the drones, and how do they coexist in a crazy environment like firefighting wildland fires. But they're developing this technology, and it's pretty exciting to where they now can do everything Charles talked about, and ensure that the manned pilots know exactly where the drones are and vice versa in those operations. So these research companies that are going out there and partnering with NASA and other research labs is our future, and it's good to talk about these things and bring them to the forefront, because there's hope that we're not just going to get trapped into one manufacturer or banned other manufacturers when all of this other good news is going on around us that is promising for the future.
Absolutely. And I would say that while the technology specifically has evolved quite a bit, when we started in 2013, it was we want drones in the places that we don't want people. And that's more true than ever, especially in public safety and firefighting. So, yeah. All right. So I think we are at the end. If anyone does come up with any more questions, please put them in the Q&A, and let's talk about what is up for next month's episode. So Tim, where are you going to be next month?
So next month during this episode, I'll be out at the Texas Robotics Summit. The Regional Training Center is putting on all the training out there. We have some really exciting exercises that we're doing. So I'll be out there. I'll get my eyes on some of the new technology coming out, and so whatever I learn out there from the summit, I'll be reporting live during that event on this episode.
Fantastic. We also have a couple of guests lined up for the next episode, which will be first Tuesday of the month, March 7th, 3:00 EST. And that is next month, March 7th, will also be the World Police Summit taking place in Dubai. And we will have a representative from Aerobotics to talk about their deployment in Dubai. That news came out officially, I think today they sent out the press release, but we had seen that teased in images previously. They have an Aerobotics drone in a box deployment on various street corners throughout the city of Dubai to act as drone as first responders as calls come in. So we'll have somebody to talk about that. We will also have somebody from Brink to talk about their new product, which launches officially a few days before that, March 2nd. You can sign up to join that live launch event. I think it's probably on the Brink website. It's also on Drone Life. You can find a story about that. So we'll have them talking about their new product line. And so our guests on this show are unpaid, unsponsored. They're just people we think you will find interesting and useful to this community. So please join us next month to hear from Brink Aerobotics and Tim live from the Texas Robotics Summit. Is that what it's called? Texas Robotics Summit. I got it.
And so Miriam, where can people find the recording of this once it's done?
When we get this recording up, the recording will be on the Drone Life TV YouTube station. Please check us out there. Like and subscribe really helps us, and stay tuned.
Thank you.
All right. I think that was a great episode, everybody. Again, those of you that are listening, if you have ideas, send them to Miriam@dronelife.com, and we'll see if we can plug them into the programs or answer the questions or whatever we can do. And we thank everybody for being here today. Chris,
Hey,
thank you.
Charles.
You want to say a few words?
Yep. One last comment. So, Tim mentioned the Texas Robotics Summit that's going on the first week in March. March is a month filled with public safety content at the regional level. So in Virginia, there will be the National Public Safety UAS Conference hosted by drone responders at Busch Gardens in Williamsburg. That's going to be taking place March 14th and 15th. And Charles, where did they get more information on that?
Look at our blog in the Drone Responders blog,
All right,
or they
blog.
can email me at charles@droneresponders.org, charles@droneresponders.org. I'll give the information with that. It's a 2-day event. It's going to have 2 evening events, 2 evening receptions, and then you get some more.
And that's at blog.droneresponders.org for more information. Also, if you are a Florida public safety agency, the Drone Responders Florida Public Safety Coordination Group, or FLOGRU, will be hosting the Florida Public Safety Drone Operations Conference. That's a mouthful. We're shortening it to Flocon. Flocon will be held in Auburndale, Florida, March 21st, 22nd, 23rd. If you are a Florida public safety agency, we want to see you there. Go to flocon.droneresponders.org for more information and to register. And if you have any questions, feel free to contact me at ctod@airt.ngo.
What's the cost of Flocon for public safety?
Flocon is free for Florida public safety agencies. You can't beat that price.
And I hope that any of you thinking about coming to Williamsburg to the Busch Gardens event, that you'll see Miriam, Tim, and Chris and I all there, hopefully.
Absolutely.
All right, thanks everybody.
Everyone.
We'll see you next month. Miriam, Tim, Chris, thank you all.
Bye-bye.
Thank you all.
That's a wrap.